Hello and welcome, everybody, to another episode of Coaching from the Heart. I am your host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me, as always, is my good friend, colleague, and co host, Harold Feddersen. Hey, Harold.
Hi, Tyler.
Thanks for being with me and all of our lovely viewers again today. They seem to be growing in numbers, so that's exciting. Our topic for today's show is embracing change. And I think pretty much everybody's going to be able to relate to this one. But before we dive into it, I just, as always, want to give people a way to find both you and myself. Just as a reminder, Harold and I are both professional transformative coaches, and we walk with people to kind of point them down their own spiritual journey of awakening and having a more wonderful life. So if you're interested in reaching out to either of us, you can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And how about you, Harold?
I can be reached at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the topic at hand, which is change. It's a juicy one. I'm sure nobody knows about that.
Hold on for
So
dear life.
hold on to your bridges, everybody. It's going to be a rocky one. No, change is, like I said, it's relevant to everybody because one of the things we can actually rely on in our life is for things to change. Some things change more slowly than others, but pretty much everything's changing all the time, and it's it's something that's worth dealing with as far as our relationship to it, I think. And uh, we can be all sorts of different ways about it, but really there's only two main ones in my experience as far as how we relate to change. And one is we can fight it like hell or like heck, right? Just to back it off the hell a little bit. In other words, you can push against it. You can you can stand in the face of change and say no, and it's going to change anyways, but then you're going to have a miserable experience. And then there's the flip side, which is embracing change, which is the title of the show. How about that? Which is really another way of saying not pushing against it. So embracing really, it doesn't have to be an act in and of itself. In a lot of ways, it's just not pushing will naturally result in a sort of a letting go and ease around change. More and more of the time, there's a learning curve with it, in my experience. So that's my little setting the table. Harold, what? I'd love for you to just jump in there and.
This is one of my favorite topics. Because as you said, it's juicy and it's for everybody. So just like you said, change is inevitable. All things are changing all the time, whether we perceive the change or not. And we can almost call the show hanging on or letting go, because that's kind of how we dance the dance of change, right? And it happens everywhere, of course. Our bodies change, our families change. Families grow and shrink, and new people come in and people go out, and our society changes. All the forms of life change. Um, Even the firmest rock, is is in a state of change, even though we might not see that during our lifetime. So it becomes more a conversation about what is your relationship to change, and in which areas of your life, or in what ways are you unwilling to sort of flow with change, and what areas are you fine with it? Because I think we all have the facility where there are certain things in our lives where we're just used to things changing. Bank accounts. Every couple of weeks, most people's bank accounts are going through some kind of a ebb and flow, if you will.
Right.
Very common.
Although there tend to be sort of caps, right, to how much we're willing to be okay with the changing of those kinds of things. That can be
For
applied
sure.
to anything. It's easy to see with a bank account, right?
Yeah.
but yeah, just to offer up another common example, my wife growing up, she moved around all the time. Like, she moved house, like, all over the country. She even lived overseas for a couple of years. So like, moving to her is like no
big
biggie,
deal.
right? Yeah, like, she's just used to it. And so she never really. It would have been probably odd for her to have a relationship with moving that was, oh, it's this awful thing and I never want to do it. Just because that's what she was used to. And that's kind of how we pick up a lot of our sort of more specific relationships to change, I think. It's just what is commonly changing in our life that we are aware of. Those things we tend to be a little more flexible with, right? And other things not as much, for sure.
And what about you? Did you, when you were growing up, did you mostly stay in the same kind of area, or did you move around a lot?
I moved a couple different times. Funnily enough, I could care less about moving, right? I'm fine with it. I now that might be a function of my spiritual journey. I'm guessing in some ways is just I'm a little more maybe tuned into taking the good stuff with me. And I don't mean stuff, right? I just mean, for me, it looks like, well, the peace and love of God is not in a house, it's not in a location, it's not in possessions. And so I'm very, very careful not to make the show about a moving show, but moving is a good example of change. And it's kind of funny we're talking about it because I am in the process of getting ready to move again. And so it's kind of, for me, it's fun. It's like, oh, this is, it's a beautiful way of just letting go of accumulated stuff that often can happen if you stay in a place for any length of time.
But this is, talk about change. My camera's different. Our conversation's going to be different today. It might be valuable for people to know, because you're actually moving to a different time zone. Like, it's the whole kit and caboodle, the whole house, dogs, everything.
It's a 1,400-mile drive.
Yeah. So it might be valuable because a lot of people moving, and we can just use this as a metaphor, moving house and home can be extremely scary and stressful. And so maybe talking about, how you have entered the embrace of it might be valuable for others to see.
Sure.
Because it sounds like you're excited or not stressed at all about it.
Yeah. It's sort of, there's a little excitement. Not a ton of excitement, more contentment, peace. Because I'm also
for you.
Oh, yeah, you're pretty excited.
I'm pretty excited. You're gonna be within driving distance of me.
I'll be closer to Harold, yeah.
It's a long drive, but it's within driving distance.
but it because I'm also great where I'm at too for the remaining, I think, however 4 months or whatever that I'm going to be here. And so it's not like I'm arbitrarily lit a fire under my butt to get me excited about getting the heck out of here. It really, to me, is a very simple conversation of what what's truly valuable. Because you start looking at all of your possessions and the things that you fill your house with, and you kind of start to ask yourself the question, could I live without this? And to me, it's an interesting question because pretty much everything is yes. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to throw everything away or give everything to Goodwill, but because it's nice to have some things for functionality and convenience and logistic ease, so I don't have to go buy them again. Um, Not that I would have to go buy them again, but when I start looking at that conversation, it personally plunges me into a spiritual conversation, a conversation about the mind, conversation about things like, I think we chatted about a little bit last week, about innate well-being, or just like I said before, the peace and the love of God, which is kind of how the Course in Miracles, the language the Course in Miracles uses. Some things that our awareness of them wanes. It comes and it goes, oftentimes depending on a variety of factors. But I don't think our capacity to experience it goes anywhere. It certainly doesn't leave when I move, but we can create the arbitrary experience of it leaving, or in this case, it would be staying, right? Maybe, for instance, oh, I love it here, right? I love it in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I might create in my mind a relationship that doesn't actually exist between this place, this physical location, or even this house, let's say that, and my capacity to experience peace and love and joy. I might say, oh, I'm leaving behind memories, or maybe I really love the house, the layout of the house, maybe. Maybe there's some things I can't take with me logistically, furniture. But for that to be a big deal, I will have to have hooked up in my mind on some level my well-being with those things. And that relationship doesn't necessarily need to be there. And it's worth exploring, in my experience. It's worth looking at and saying, oh, is that, like I said, I asked the question, could I live without this? Not only could I live without this, could I have a wonderful life without this? Could I be at peace without this? Could I be in love without this? And the answer is almost always yes. I keep looking for an exception to that, and I haven't found one. But I'll keep you guys updated.
Maybe the Course in Miracles.
If I left without the Course,
that's got to come with you.
No, well, not necessarily, in my experience. Because it's just a book, right? It might be pointing towards a deeper truth, but that's already in my right mind. So the whatever's the essence of that, I guess, is maybe how I talk about that. That does go with me. That goes with all of us.
So it sounds like one of the root things that's making this work for you is you love and appreciate where you are, and you love and appreciate where you're going. Like you found a peace in both places, not I love this place and I don't want to go there, nor I don't like where I am and I have to go there in order to find what I want. So it sounds like the sort of root of it is finding the peace and the joy and the
Yeah.
love where you are, and it goes with you where you go.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I love that you brought that up because one of the things that people often bring up in coaching or just in normal conversations I have with people is they sort of set things up to where um, they think they have to be really upset or um, really not like where they're at in order to get themselves to make a change or make a move.
Mm, yeah.
And that's a really interesting dynamic because that doesn't need to be there either. In fact, my experience is wherever you go, there you are, which means if your sort of set point in your mind is mostly stress and a little peace, guess what? Changing locations, that's going to stay the same. There might be an interlude, uh, a, a, a brief reprieve, um, but we all tend to return to our set points unless we have some kind of spiritual growth or transformation, or I don't know how to talk about it. Seeing, enlightenment, waking up, uncovering the truth. I don't know. We
And
got lots of words for that sort of stuff.
that's such a great point because for me, whenever I find myself wanting to run to something, I often will ask myself, am I running to something or am I running away from something? Because unlike your wife, I've actually lived in this small corner of the planet my whole life. And there have been many times where, it's like, I gotta move somewhere. Um, and I always come back to the question, am I running away from something or am I running to something? Because there's a significant difference between those two types of energies. And whether it's actually moving house and home or whether it's just things like I want to run away from my career or my work, or I want to run away from this relationship or whatever. Um, I always check in with myself, am I running away or am I running to? And for the most part, it's almost always running away because there's something I'm uncomfortable or unwilling to be with in the thing, whatever it is, that I'm in. So inevitably, as soon as I see, okay, I'm actually running from, then then the work starts, and then you got to muster up the courage and the presence to enter into that conversation with yourself.
Sure.
And that's always an interesting distinction, I think.
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up because I think also the experience of running towards something is it's just different, right? It's not it doesn't feel frantic or desperate. Oftentimes, it's like, oh, this is it's more of like a marathon run. Right? It's slow and steady. Uh, but we could. There's nothing wrong with running towards stuff either.
Yeah, because I find the running towards is usually more of a creative energy,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was trying to
whereas
get at.
running
But
from is that
you just said
fear-based.
you just said it better, which is
Um,
usually the case. Harold has better words than I do, so.
I don't know about that. Oh, I had something else. Oh, and with regards to change, because I saw a connection between the two things that I hadn't seen before.
Mm.
Okay, you're gonna have to. I'm gonna think on
Oh,
this one.
dead
I
airspace.
lost it.
Okay,
I
that's
lost
at
it.
least we're not on radio, so that wouldn't play well.
Yeah, that'd be. We'd have to go to commercial.
So you were looking at the was it the running and change on the
Is the
whole,
running toward or running from?
and you were pointing towards a creative energy.
Oh yeah, with regards to change. So with our relationship, because it's actually a relationship to change, because change is happening, whether you, like you said, whether you like it or not,
Yeah,
whether you resist it or embrace it, it's happening. Everything, your body, every 7 years, every single cell in our bodies is completely
right.
a different cell, right? So, uh, which always leads me to the conversation of who am I, which I love, and that's a different. Um, But with regards to change, it's our relationship to change that is actually where the sort of where the work, if you will, is. Not sure that's quite right, but
Yeah, the practice or discipline or
so
willingness to look. Yeah.
yeah. So it's almost like, are you willing to surf? Because everything in the universe is flowing. Are you willing to surf, or are you trying desperately to hang on to the shore?
Right.
And sometimes sometimes we're hanging on. Well, we always hang on because of fear, but sometimes we're hanging on because our relationship to the unknown is actually hasn't been addressed either,
Hmm.
which is very similar. They're kind of like, the unknown and change are kind of like twins or something. Because it's
Yeah.
entering that unknown, like that whole. I've said this before, and I said it in a video I put out last week. Love this Antonio Machado's poem, translated by David White. Pathmaker, there is no path. You make the path by walking, and by walking, you make the path. I love that. I love that
Hmm.
poem, and it's all about the stepping. It's the stepping as your foot, comes back to the ground becomes underneath of your foot, and the ground
Hmm.
becomes under your foot because of the step. If you don't step, there is no ground in front of you. Um, wow, that was nice.
You're getting deep metaphysically on me here.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's
it's
good.
so it's a there are a couple conversations that we can enter into, and one is the conversation about our relationship with change, and then the other is our relationship with the unknown.
Hmm.
And I think you can't really step forward into your life if you're hanging on, I'll give a visual. If you're hanging on, to the chair behind you, you can't do both things. And sometimes, what is it called? A leap of faith. You just,
I was just gonna say
just
that.
trust, trust that the ground will be there by the time your foot lands. Because we get to start the foot out and we don't know there's anything there, and then we pull our foot back. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, and if this is a new conversation to you, I highly encourage a hop of faith or a no,
a
I mean,
smaller distance span.
yeah, I say it slightly tongue in cheek, but in all seriousness, there's a learning curve there. There's,
Yeah,
if
baby steps.
yeah,
Nothing wrong with baby steps.
be gentle with yourself as you explore this. If you haven't ever looked at the nature of change before or embracing change,
You
yeah,
don't, you don't have to shoot yourself out of a cannon.
no, and hope that there's a trampoline 100 yards
Hope
away.
Man, I hope there's a net by the time I get to the ground.
Yeah, you might want to do your downside planning on that one. Any good business person would tell you. But no, I like where you're going with it because one of the people that comes to mind for me when I talk about change and think about change, and is kind of a teacher author, Byron Katie. She's got her teaching's called The Work. A lot of you are probably familiar with it, but it's really all about she wrote a book called Loving What Is, and it's a beautiful book. I recommend you check it out, but it kind of says it all in the title. And a lot of sort of spiritual principles are very simple like that, but really, if you begin to see the deeper truth that change is, it's just something you can rely on to happen. Fast or slow, changes in the works. And you can really only align yourself with it or push against it, or sort of do nothing, which is kind of pushing against it, right? My one of my good teachers, Michael Neal, he gives the analogy of boating. So you're drifting, sailing, or motorboating. Drifting, you're kind of just dead in the water, right? You're just sort of, you're laying down against life. And oftentimes that's not all that exciting, but sometimes it's kind of fun to drift and see where it takes you. In motorboating, it's kind of trying to force the headway. You're
plow your way through.
You're trying to make the change. If it's
Anthony
to be,
Robbins.
it's up to me. Yeah.
It's yeah. Nothing against Tony Robbins, but just the whole rah.
Positive thinking movement, that change is, I'm in charge of the world, that kind of thing. And then there's sailing, which is just this beautiful kind of a dance with the wind, where we're aligning ourselves with the wind, but we're not doing nothing. We're still engaging with the world, but we're not working against what is, right? We're using it to go faster, and not need to go faster in your life necessarily, but to have the least resistance, essentially. And for me, it's a beautiful analogy of kind of how that relationship can be, because it really our experience of change is our relationship to it. It's not that change has this inherent experience that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an inside out job. We have to create our experience of change. Now, if you're sitting here and, like I said, this is the first conversation you've ever heard about the deeper nature of change, then don't go too crazy. But it's something that you can learn to have a different relationship with, a less stressful relationship. Stress is just another word for resistance. Pushback. We talk about pushback in relationships. There's no pushback if we're not pushing. And so I think we talked about this in a way earlier episode a bit more, but maybe on stress or something. But we got to look within, because the tendency with change is to focus on the thing that's changing. And that's fine. And you probably do. We all need to do that sort of with logistics, right? So like when I'm looking at moving, there's logistics that go with that. There's, okay, do I want to rent a moving truck? Do I want to do a pod and have it sent? Do I want to pull a trailer? you know, uh, how are we going to work out the timing of the sale of the house and fixing up the, getting the contractors in? There's lots of logistics, but it's up to me on a level that's worth knowing about if I'm going to have a horrible experience of that or a peaceful one or somewhere in between. And it's likely going to be a little bit of all of those, but the more we explore that, the deeper nature of it, the more we can relinquish our stranglehold on our resistance to it.
I really like that Michael Neal analogy you brought in too, because
Hmm.
I realized when I said, your relationship to change, that might not make any sense to some people, that languaging. So
Mm.
the visual, because we can sense, with change, am I a drifter? Am I a power boat motoring, forcing my way through the world? Or am I more of a dancer? And I think it's with terms of the sailing is such a beautiful analogy, because there's the wind, there's the water, there's the vessel. Do you take care of your vessel as you're moving through? um,
Mm.
that's a beautiful way to enter into the conversation with yourself about how you are with change, because I like what you said there. Change just is. It's your I can't remember your exact words, but they were great. How it's your experience of change is kind of
The
like that.
relationship.
Yeah, that is your relationship. So if you experience change as painful and hard, and um, you don't like it, um, then
Yeah.
you might be in the sort of, you might actually be in a life preserver pulled drifting behind the sailboat kind of.
Yeah. 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 And a word that's coming to my mind is orientation. So
Mm.
how are we orienting ourselves in relation to what is happening?
Because if
What's
the
our
wind is
orientation?
coming from in front of you and you've got your sail up,
Yeah.
you're going to be fighting the wind. It seems like you're trying to work with the sailboat, but
Right.
you're going against the grain of nature. Nature is telling you, the wind is into you. It's actually time to throw up the anchor, and now is the time we sort of wait for the sort of movement of the thing to change, and then we hoist up the sail
Yeah.
and off we go again.
Yeah. And I do want to put in sort of the caveat that none of those sort of orientations or attitudes or relationships are bad or wrong. So don't use this conversation as a tool to beat yourself up for doing what you've been doing. Um, but one is more peaceful. It's just a cause effect. It's not a good bad distinction. It's a when there's less resistance, or your natural well-being bubbles to the surface more of the time. When there's more pushback, then there's more stress, because that's just how that works in the mind. And so it helps to first be able to, like you said, kind of identify, well, which one do I tend towards?
Hmm.
What's kind of my pull at the moment? That doesn't have to continue to be that way. Um, as you learn more about it. Yeah, go ahead, Harold.
It reminds me of this might not be correct, but it reminds me of Castaway with Tom Hanks, where we all get to that place where we're cursing the wind or we're cursing the waves. That's just, I don't think we're
Wilson.
yeah, I don't think we're suggesting that, you're going to be, it's going to be blue skies and you're going to be, sunbathing as you gracefully navigate your sailboat at all times through the seas. Um,
Yeah.
it's part of the whole part of being on a boat in the open waters is being in the tumultuous nature of life.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
there's some change in our lives, death, like you do not have a choice. If someone close to you passes, you don't have the choice. You are in the storm.
Right.
You can pretend, you can hunker down in the bulkheads of your ship and try and hide yourself from it, but there it, we are in this open water of life, right?
And I get seasick, so that sounds particularly unpleasant to me. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought there.
That's fine, Oskin. Because that's part of it, right? Like a lot of well, I just saw this article. I haven't read it yet, but it was this article on how a lot of spiritual people navigate towards spirituality as a way to make the sort of the natural ruggedness of life softer to themselves. Like they actually use spiritual teachings as a way to soften reality, which is not the same as actually entering into the tumultuous nature of life fully, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
fancy way of shielding ourselves.
And I really like the word that we used in the title of the show, embracing.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of suggests walking into, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
A
not,
willingness
not,
to sort of
yeah,
lean your heart into the.
yeah. I actually love that term, lean into it, leaning into it. Because it is, yeah, it's not a hiding from. Um, and I think the term actually that I use is a bit of a misnomer, making peace with what is, because it really peace is as well in our mind uh, when we're not busy stirring things up in there. And so we don't really need to create that for ourselves. We don't need to make it and manufacture it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we do need to get out of the way. stop,
That actually
stop doing what we're doing.
that actually reminds me of the if you're on your sailboat and a storm comes in, cursing the storm is not going to change the storm. The
Sure.
storm is what is. So
Yeah.
how can we be in this process? And sometimes the thing to do is to just go down, make yourself a cup of tea, get in your sleeping bag, and have a nap. And sometimes you have to actually be in that storm with the waves crashing against you, trying to tear you away from the boat and sink
Yeah.
you under.
Right. They call it riding out the storm.
Riding it
Right.
out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's no sort of, that's the beauty of this whole thing, is there's no formula to it. You know, because we always want to know, like, what is the right thing to do? The word should. What should I do? I love it. Because quit shoulding on yourself is what I always say to people. And because there's no formula. It's, you listen to your heart, listen into yourself. What is the thing to do now? How
Right.
do I move into this? You know, ask
Yeah.
for guidance from outside or within.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I was just gonna say that and we sort of have a compass. Um, yeah, and it's totally fine to ask, other people too. But oftentimes they're riding their own storm, so uh, they're pretty focused on their their navigation, and so they're not going to be as reliable as your own compass a lot of times, which is just looking to that deeper part of ourselves, that part of the mind that is at peace and that knows all is well, even in the midst of this perfect storm. And yeah, I really like the idea of sort of the changing winds as a metaphor for
Hmm.
changing life, because it's unpredictable. But sometimes when it's blowing in a certain direction for a while, we start to think it's predictable.
Oh yeah, and we get comfy.
and we get, and there's nothing wrong with relaxing, right? But we start thinking and believing, oh, maybe I can rely on it to go north indefinitely.
Yeah, you start
And
giving
then
over
we
the
start,
reins, sort of.
yeah, we start building our foundation. We let, we leave the captain's chair, and we go sunbathe, and then all of a sudden you're 100 miles off course. Right. Not that there's a right course to be on necessarily, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah,
there
that's a
can
good one
be
because that and that's so especially in our society because it's our lives have never been easier. Like there's food everywhere. There's we've got access to everything. Like it's so easy to just
at
become
least if you're able to watch this show, then most likely it's
yeah, your life is pretty good, right?
yeah. You have
Um,
access to YouTube, so
yeah. What more is there? Um,
what
so I
more
think
could you
that's a
want out of
that's a good point too, right? Because we can get into this false sense of security. It's the same thing as believing that we are our bodies. Because it looks like for the most part this is the same body I've had for a bunch of years. It looks that
right?
way. It's not true. And so then I can get into this thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can't touch my toes anymore. What's going on there? Because I haven't been
Right.
paying attention to the shift of it all.
Yeah. 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 It really brings into question, I think. Well, it's kind of funny actually, because one of the conversations that I find myself in with myself and with other people is there anything we can rely on, um, no matter what? And in a funny kind of way, change is one of those things, right? I think I said a couple times, you can rely on change to happen, um, and so you don't have to make your life about forcing change, but you can rely on, and there are some other things we rely on. You can rely on, our bodies to not make it more than probably 100 years or so, right? I think there's a few examples of a bit longer, but
There are
give or
more
take,
examples of not.
give or take, yeah, yeah. You can pretty reliably, you can rely on physical mortality, certainly. Um, there's not very many things we can rely on, though, and that always for me turns me towards a spiritual conversation. I don't know if I think, like you and I actually, Harold, spoke briefly about it last week, but I don't know if I've had the individual experience of something completely solid to build a foundation on. But there seems to be some beautiful things about some deeper truths to us beyond the body that are worth looking at, certainly as potential suitors for a more uh, something that's present. I really like that word presence, um, or available, something that's available. And to me, the only thing I can really think of that fits in that category is God. And all I really have is a concept of God, right? It's not the actual truth of whatever divinity is there. But for me, it's a really comforting, ongoing conversation to be in. Okay, in the midst of this whirlwind of change. Sometimes it looks like our lives are changing more slowly. Sometimes it looks like it's more quickly. But if it's always changing, is there anything I could at least look towards, um, that's going to be there. And my experience, my awareness of it certainly will change. But I think there's a capacity of some kind of spiritual presence that is always there. I don't really know what that is or how to talk about it with in any meaningful way, but for me, it's tremendously valuable. Anything you want to add to the conversation, Harold? A disagreement, perhaps, or is this a good?
Yeah, it's such a. So to put it in, the term that just came to me when I was just before you started that one was anchoring. Because a lot of us, most of us, when we first begin to sort of explore the spiritual nature of life, we come from a place where we believe like, okay, this is what I am. Like, who are you? This is me. This is like, you're looking at them like, this is me, right? And there's a real anchoring in this sort of large physical space, and the anchor is big and it feels very secure. And as we continue to go deeper and deeper and open more, the anchor or the anchor that we used sort of it changes shape. And I'm going to cross some huge thresholds in a very short space.
Before you do, I just want to put in
Yeah.
the word identification. It sounds like you're talking about
Yeah.
as a way of talking about anchoring, because that might, although
Mhm.
it goes with our boating metaphor.
It did. That's why I thought it was coming.
Dang, you're more clever than I am. I just can't. I'm a little behind the curve, but yeah, no,
The poet. It's
I
just the poet.
think what you were pointing to was but as a way of anchoring, we sort of use the power of the mind to identify with some kind of self. Or
Yep. And what I like about the word anchor is it has a physical, like anchors are, big and heavy, and they're, and that's how it feels. It feels like, I know I'm really this dense thing. I really am this.
yeah, it feels
I really
solid.
am. I really am. I'm like, you're looking at, this is really me. And then, the anchors start to soften and shift. And eventually our anchors become sort of, this this isn't like a universal truth, but our anchors can become tighter and more precise. So we anchor in this belief that we're a soul, or that there's God, or we are God, or whatever. We our anchor becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. But my experience is, as we continue to go into this, the anchors become less and less solid, just as matter is. If you go into matter, if I put my finger under one of those microscopes, what looks like a really dense thing, we start seeing how there's all this space, and then we go into that, and then it just keeps opening and opening. And it's the same kind of sensation
Right, it's
with
almost like
that.
the closer you get to it, the further you are, or the closer you think you are, the it kind of goes whoosh.
Yeah, or the softer you hold it, the more it actually dissolves away.
Right, it becomes less solid, our experience.
Hmm. And so one of the things that I love about that poem that I shared earlier is that it speaks to kind of the nature of life itself, like what we are. We are a becoming. We don't exist except in terms of this illusionary past. Like, we are in a sense, we are a becoming, or we are the becoming. As the foot goes out and as it comes back down, then the earth becomes beneath it. Just as we sort of move into life, there's a becoming in that. I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes sense or not, but
yeah, unfolding. So someone, other people might use that word too, right? But it's, yeah, it is like the poem, like you said. As you step out, there's nothing there until you step there, you know. Um, and that's kind of what life becomes. And it
Another,
can be a beautiful experience too. It doesn't have to be, because it can sound scary, sort of. Oh, my experience of my identification of me starts to dissolve. That can sound scary, right? If you're
mhm.
not, uh, if you've not had that experience, or maybe you've had that experience with a lot of beliefs attached to it, and I always remember the story. This is kind of an aside, but uh, I think I heard this from Michael Neal too, where he was telling the story of working with somebody, and they were describing an experience they had, which to him at first sounded like a beautiful experience. Where they said, "Oh, I was on a bus, and um, and sort of all of a sudden, the barriers between me and the other people and the bus started to dissolve, and I started to sort of experience myself as nothing and everything at the same time." And then they said, and that's how I knew I was possessed by the devil.
Darn, you had it right up until the end.
Right? So there was an experience there, and then there was a judgment of the experience immediately sort of built in based on some preconditioning. Um, so I feel like we might be getting a little bit deep for our audience. So I just want to bring us back a little bit to um, just that basic conversation of embracing change as a way of wrapping up, and really peace of mind, peace of experience, and ease, a contentment, a letting go, but moving with, is not only possible standing in change, but it's actually our natural state. And if we can just begin to get a sneak peek even of what we put between us and change, where that's the relationship, right? With our own mind, how we fight it, how we push against it. If we can just see, that's the only way we can ever experience change as unpleasant, if not straight up awful, right? Um, that's not to make anybody's awful experience wrong. It's just there's also another possibility that's actually, in my experience, more natural, which is, um, to go with Byron Katie, loving what is, a peace and ease of what is, in the face of sometimes some tremendous changes, a huge change of circumstance. Like my moving house is nothing compared to what a lot of other people go through. And I have seen examples of people go through those things, you know, pick one, right? Their whole family was murdered, or, their village was wiped out, or, that kind of thing. And they're okay. It's not to say they're jumping around in glee, but a part of who they are, part of their spiritual essence, is still available, and it's available to all of us. So Harold, any parting shots as we wrap up the show? We're kind of coming up to the end here.
Yeah, I think the final little thing will be, um, if you find that like change is happening to you, then there's a fundamental confusion.
Mm.
If you think you're a solid thing and all this change is happening around you, then excuse me, but you're confused. Because
You're
you are,
delusional.
yeah, because you are change. Like you are part of the whole dance. It's not
Mm.
you versus the universe.
Right.
You know,
It's
it's
not
you,
personal.
and yeah, it's you're part of the whole thing. So,
Right.
I'd probably, if this is your first, you've said that a couple times. This is your first sort of intro into this kind of conversation. Go back to the boat conversation and re-listen to that chunk because there's so much to mine in that. With everything. If you're thinking about, should I change careers or should I, listen to how, where are you in the boat spectrum? Because you are part of you are the change. You are
Yeah.
the whole kit and caboodle.
Right. I like that. Yeah. That kind of brings to mind Course in Miracles. There's a line. I can't remember it exactly, but it says, as you kind of take this journey, if you will. It's not a real journey, like Harold said. It's just it just is. But you the only the only form difference in form is you will smile more and your forehead will be more serene. Like you're still gonna be in change, like Harold said. We are change. You're still gonna be in it. You're still gonna experience. You're still gonna have a relationship to it. Um, but you can have a more enjoyable experience. You can have a more
You,
peaceful experience.
you can smile in the storm just as you smile in the
Yeah.
sunshine
Yep.
out on the deck of your sailboat.
Yeah, and on a deeper level, it's all weather, right? It's just all weather.
And
It's
there's,
all changing.
sometimes it's very powerful to find the beauty inside of that storm too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that. I
stay
like
open
it.
to that.
And I think beauty, and there's beauty in the truth of it,
Hmm.
of the truth of the change, right? Um, and there's certainly simplicity. so, so
I
I
remember.
think yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I remember just a story. I remember when my brother passed away back in 1999. It was chaos. Just all sorts of
Mm.
chaos. He had two little boys, and um, it was absolute chaos. And I was just sitting in the hospital. I was just crying, and then all of a sudden, there was this complete peace and beauty just overtook me.
Mm.
And I wrote uh, my partner at the time. I wrote her this letter, and I said, in the center of the swirling chaos, there's peaceful joy. I will meet you there. And and that experience has never left me. Uh, Partially because
Mm.
actually, years later, I ran across a Rumi poem that was basically the
I
same
was gonna
thing.
say
Which,
that sounds like something I've heard before.
yeah, no, it's almost the exact same thing. It blew my mind because I didn't know who Rumi was at the time.
Is
Um,
that the field one? I'll meet
yeah,
you there. Yeah, I
yeah, somebody
love
said that
that.
to
I
me recently.
love that.
Yeah. So here's like, am I Rumi reincarnated? No, of course not. Um,
But you are of the same mind.
sure. Um, but the point of that story or that experience for me was, you can be in the biggest shitstorm that you've experienced, and the very peace and beauty of life is right there with you. It is not, you are not separate from it.
Oh, beautiful.
So with our boat analogy, even when the waves are crashing against, the ship and it seems like all hope is lost, there is this peaceful beauty and joy, and we can just turn our cheeks upward and just wow.
Right. Beautiful. I can't say it any better than that. So we better end there. Thanks for sharing that, Harold. That was a beautiful story. It's obviously, very personal. So, and thank you to all of our wonderful viewers for tuning in again. You're growing in number. I know you are. So thank you for for being a part of this with us. We love sharing with you guys, and keep the messages coming. Questions, answers, show topic ideas. We love it all. So so thank you for those of you who've done that. And just again, give people a way to find us. Harold and I, again, we walk with people on their spiritual journeys of awakening. And
we hold the map as you use the wheel in the boat.
We temporarily rely on our navigation until you get yours figured. So if you're interested in working with us on a deeper level, you can find me, Coach tylerthurman.blogspot.com. And you, Harold?
You can find me at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. So thank you again, and until next time, I wish you all the love that's already inside your mind.